So the treatment options for high-risk MDS include transplant, for curative intent. But in order to be considered for transplant, patients often need to undergo therapy such as hypomethylating therapy, whether that's azacitidine or decitabine, or the oral version of that, cedazuridine. Typically, one of those three hypomethylating therapies serves as the backbone of therapy, and those are FDA-approved therapies for patients with high-risk MDS. However, most of our patients with high-risk MDS do not have as high an outcome with those FDA-approved therapies as we would like. And we want everybody to have a option that generates a benefit. And not everybody does from those therapies, and we're often looking to improve on those response rates. And as a result of that, we often recommend patients be looking at clinical trials in the upfront setting for any new diagnosis of high-risk MDS. We really do lean on the clinical trials, and most clinical trials for high-risk MDS patients include that backbone, whether it's azacitidine, decitabine, or an oral version of decitabine. So I would, again, really highlight that clinical trials are the mainstay and something that's really important to learn about and to ask questions about in terms of what is out there and is that something that is available to me. So the things that we've learned in the prior clinical trials have been that we've had challenges with toxicity when we add agents to the backbone of therapy, whether it be azacitidine or decitabine. And so for those reasons, I think the future clinical trials that we're now trying to build really are mindful of the added toxicities that may happen when we combine agents or add them together. The other things we've learned is that each individual MDS may have a different portfolio or profile, if you will, or even phenotype based on the specific mutations. And that kind of profile or phenotype allows us to potentially select for a therapy that may work better in that particular situation versus another. And so I think that's also really an important consideration as you're looking towards clinical trials. So I think both the phenotype or the mutation profile for the specific MDS is important, and also the added toxicities that we may need to consider that may co-occur or add to the backbone of therapy that's either aza or decitabine or the oral version of decitabine. So this is very personal. I have a lot of conversations with my patients about, how do we make decisions? And the first decision that we often need to wrap our hands around are what are the goals of this therapy? For some patients, we're trying to cure, and we're trying to get to transplant for curative intent. And for others, the goals may be, let's just stay on some therapy that decreases the likelihood of this progressing to something more aggressive like leukemia. And for other patients, it's, I don't want to get transfused all of the time. This is just impairing my quality of life, and I really hope for less time in the clinic. So I think that's the first step with regard to making decisions about how to select the therapy that is a best fit for you as an individual patient. We mentioned earlier that each MDS can have a different mutational spectrum and can have different pieces on it that may offer one therapy or another. And then the likelihood of response to those exact therapies, as well as the toxicities of those therapies, are important considerations as well. And then finally, so many of our patients really value being independent and not relying on others, and the choices that we often need to make are often logical. How far away do I live from access to this clinical trial, and what kind of supports am I going to need, and who's going to help me with that? And those sorts of decisions, the practical decisions, can also sway the options in ways that are really important to consider. And this is one of the reasons why having shared decision-making with your physician and or caregiver team and letting them know how you're making decisions and what it's based on can really help make the optimal choice for you as an individual patient.